vaccinated. Okay, so in terms of brucellosis, we've got the S19 vaccine from OBP and we've got RB51 from MSD, and both of these can be used for your heifers between 4 to 8 months old. RB51, as I said, additional benefit that you can boost your older cows. And it's just because your Brucella S19, if you vaccinate older cows with this vaccine, or even heifers older than 8 months, then they might have persistent brucellosis titers, and you'll pick them up as positive, but then they might not be truly positive. It might just be due to the vaccine. So that is why we do not allow heifers older than 8 months to be vaccinated with S19, because it can create a false picture. And once again, with both these vaccines, just be aware of accidental self-vaccination or getting the vaccine into your eye, because you can contract brucellosis this way. Okay, I just want to quickly run through Section 11 of the Animal Diseases Act, and the purpose of this is just to once again make you aware of the responsibilities of the farmer. So this section of the Act states that it's the responsibility of the owner of animals to firstly prevent disease in their herds, to treat any disease if present, and to prevent the spread to other herds. And this is not just for controlled diseases, it's not just for brucellosis, it's for all animal diseases. So the onus actually does rest on the owner of the animals to keep their animals healthy, and in so doing protecting other people's animals as well through preventing the spread of disease. Okay, so government veterinary services, your private vet services, your cattle farmers, industry, all of us have our part to play in brucellosis prevention and control. So this is not a disease where you can just say, oh no, it's government's responsibility, they need to sort brucellosis out. All of us have our defined role to play, and all of us have our different responsibilities. So in terms of the farmers, very important to inform them, in order to help themselves, they need to know the brucellosis status of their dairy herd. They need to test their animals as required. They need to vaccinate their heifers so that they can help build a herd immunity to protect their herd. If they buy in new cattle, they need to only buy in from herds that have been tested negative, and they need to ask for proof of negative herd tests. Very important to apply proper biosecurity measures, and this is to protect your animals, to protect your assets, and also to be aware that this disease is a zoonosis, and that the farmer, family, and workers can contract this disease if they're not careful. Okay, so just a quick history of brucellosis control in South Africa. In 1969, the veterinary services of the government announced that they would like to bring brucellosis under control and eventually try to eradicate it. So they established a test and slaughter program in 1969. Over the next 20 years or so, they made very good progress. And then in the late 1980s, the brucellosis prevalence was actually quite low. And you'll note that all this work was done before the scheme was even published in 1988. Okay, so those initial schemes and the approach they took, the test and slaughter approach and the vaccination of heifers, seemed to achieve very good control. At that point in time, in the 1970s, 1980s, government funding and available manpower was prioritized at a national level for the control of this disease. And at that point in time, veterinary services was also a national function and not a provincial function like it's now. And also, in general, there was good compliance from the livestock owners with the regulatory requirements for brucellosis. Okay, and then after 1988, when the brucellosis scheme was published, the responsibility of the continued testing and vaccination was handed over to the livestock owners. And then also in 1996, we got our new constitution, and veterinary services now fell under a provincialized structure. And our act was actually written differently to, fit into a more national or nationalized structure. So all these things sort of led to a gradual increase in the occurrence of the disease. And this is mainly due to non-compliance with the prescribed control measures. Okay, so now finally, after having all this background on the disease, the history of the disease in the country, the question we now ask ourselves is, so have we lost the battle with brucellosis? Okay, so firstly, like we discussed, brucellosis prevention and the control thereof is definitely a shared responsibility between farmers, industry, and veterinary services as well. So farmers need to take their part of the responsibility through vaccinating their heifers, having their herds tested as required, and deal with the reactors decisively to prevent further spread of infection in your herd if it's present, and to only buy in animals from brucellosis negative herds, not to buy in animals blindly, but to know what is the disease status of the animals that I'm buying. And I mean, we're talking about brucellosis here, but you need to keep in mind tuberculosis as well. You need to keep in mind EBL. You need to keep in mind trichomonas. So there are a lot of diseases you need to keep in mind in order to build up a healthy herd. And farmers need to take responsibility for this. And I think it's our roles as veterinarians as well to educate them and make them aware of how to build up a healthy herd. Okay, so in the case of brucellosis as well, good fences do make good neighbors. You do not want your healthy, clean cattle mixing with cattle that are diseased. Where possible, it's not ideal to share grazing or to mix cattle unless you definitely know what the disease status of those other cattle are. Also be careful of things like showgrounds where different animals mix in the same camps, as disease can also be transmitted there. Okay, so those are the measures that a farmer can take from an individual perspective to protect their own, to protect their herd. Then you will always have some remaining problems that require a collective responsibility and control. And this is also why brucellosis is a controlled animal disease. Even if the farmer does their absolute best and they do everything in their power, there are still things that are often out of their control. And that's where veterinary services needs to come in as well. So in a situation where your neighboring cattle, where there is beef cattle, communal cattle, other dairy cattle, are infected with brucellosis, let's say fences are being cut, the animals are mixing, scavengers are dragging placentas or aborted fetuses, from farm to farm. Cattle might be bought under false declarations and unverified test results. So these are all things that are out of the farmer's hands and out of their control. So this is where government veterinary services, your private vets, industry, the stock theft unit from SAPS, your livestock associations, community leaders, everyone needs to communicate and actually work together to bring this disease under control. The current brucellosis scheme that we have, the legislation is actually quite solid and quite good. It's more the implementation thereof that we need to review, because we need to start holding each other responsible and each of us need to start playing our part. Okay, this all links in with the veterinary strategy of 2016 to 2026. I mentioned this during the controlled animal disease week that you had as well. So just to quickly run through it again so that you can see where brucellosis fits into the bigger picture. Is the OIE, the World Organization for Animal Health, in 2014 did a performance of veterinary services gap analysis for South Africa. And after identifying certain gaps in our veterinary services, and that's just not just government veterinary services, that's a combined private and government veterinary services of the country. This led to the development of the South African veterinary strategy. And yeah, we've got the 6 pillars or main pillars of that strategy. The veterinary authority, this is that provincialized versus nationalized structure of veterinary services. Animal health, and your brucellosis policy falls under animal health. You've got your veterinary public health, feed and food safety, food and veterinary laboratory diagnostics, animal product identification, recording and traceability, and animal welfare. So these are the 6 main pillars of things that need to be desperately addressed within veterinary services to make sure we function effectively. Okay, I'm not going to go through the detail of the vet strategy again, but just want to jump straight into the bovine brucellosis policy of South Africa. So the veterinary strategy identified brucellosis as a model disease. So it's not the most important disease in the country necessarily, but the type of control measures and cooperative working that you need to bring this disease under control makes it a good model disease. If we are able to put measures in place to better control brucellosis, it's a lot easier then to use these measures that are in place and hook on other diseases, for example, tuberculosis, onto it to more effectively control animal diseases within the country. Okay, so the policy document that has been developed just set out the broad framework of the disease control strategy that we would like to follow for bovine brucellosis control in cattle, and obviously this calls for collective control. Okay, I just shared you the link as well. If you want to have a look at the bovine brucellosis control policy, this will just give you a good idea of what the current situation is and how we intend to move forward. This was signed off in July this year, and the next step that we have is development of the implementation plans for each of the 7 objectives that have been identified by the policy. Okay, so just to quickly mention them, the 7 objectives that need to be tackled through more detailed implementation plans are your vaccination strategy, education, testing, movement control, slaughter, reporting, and then the effective implementation of these control measures. Okay, I just want to share with you as well that some of the successes so far, because there's a lot of hype about brucellosis, and I think we're all glad that it's getting a lot more media attention because it's creating awareness in the public domain and among farmers as well. But I think sometimes people miss what is actually happening behind the scenes. Unfortunately, everything can't be corrected overnight. The disease can't be controlled within the space of a year, but a lot is happening in the background. So we've got bovine brucellosis working group through state veterinary services and a brucellosis steering committee through the National Animal Health Forum. And these 2 groups have got a lot of expertise and influence. Over the last few years, we've developed various awareness materials. We've distributed it far and wide just to help create awareness amongst our colleagues and our farmers as well. And as you should know, as final year vet students, you did the Controlled Diseases Week, and that's a fantastic inclusion from the University of Pretoria side. When I qualified in 2011, we didn't have this Controlled Diseases Week, and I mean, I knew very little about brucellosis when I finished at Onderstepoort. So I think it's great that they're creating awareness amongst the final year vet students as well. And then also with regards to our labs, 8 out of 9 of the provinces have provincial veterinary labs that can at minimum at least test using the RBT. And you're just getting back to the question that was asked to Dr. Sello a bit earlier with regards to EBL. EBL at this stage is not a controlled disease within the country, so that's why it's something that hasn't been prioritized, to be tested for at provincial veterinary labs. But this is something that through the Animal Health Forum requires further discussion to see what the needs are and how we can best address testing requirements. Because if it's identified as something we need to control, and if we need to bring this in, for example, as a control disease or get provincial labs on board to test, it's something that can be looked at. Okay, so for brucellosis, there's a lot of local research projects on brucellosis, and this has definitely increased over the last few years. If you go and have a look at Google Scholar, there are a lot more articles on brucellosis emerging from South Africa in the last 5 years or so. And then also the Department of Health and the NICD has come on board. They've initiated some research projects just to sort of look at the seroprevalence of the disease in certain human populations. Unfortunately, with the COVID situation, these projects have been halted a bit, but at least we're sort of taking hands as a One Health initiative in looking at human health as well. Okay, so we're almost done. Okay, so in terms of the way forward, the current legislation that we have should still be applied. The brucellosis policy document has been published, and now we need to start developing those detailed implementation plans. We need to do socioeconomic impact assessments and budget determinations to figure out how best to tackle those 7 objectives that we listed a bit earlier. So then we finally get to answering the question, and that is basically that the battle has not been lost. This is an ongoing battle. Brucellosis is not a disease that you can control and eradicate within a year or 5. This is something that's going to require decades of control. But the sooner we start and the more intensively we start, the better progress we're going to make. So it's very important to start by doing what we can with what we have. And I mean, one of the easiest things is just creating awareness and sharing relevant and accurate information. Once again, that example, if a farmer can just ask the question, these animals that I want to buy, do they originate from a negative herd? And please, can you supply me with the testing results of the herd, let's say as signed off by your veterinarian? You know, then already they're preventing buying in animals with brucellosis, and that's without spending a cent themselves. So I think just by creating proper awareness and educating our farmers, we can get a long way in starting to control and especially prevent brucellosis. So if you would like to read more on brucellosis, I just gave you some links. If you go onto the NICD website, there's nice information there on the disease in humans. The departmental website has got the interim manual for brucellosis and also the policy document. And then the Animal Health Forum website has got a lot of nice awareness materials for brucellosis, pamphlets. There's some radio talks, some video clips. So if you ever need to share something with colleagues or with farmers or with friends that are interested, there's a lot of good material available that you can share. Then just as a last slide, I just want to make you aware of a current awareness campaign that we're running. It's a collaborative approach through the South African Veterinary Council, National Animal Health Forum, the Department of Agriculture, and all the associated partners. We're embarking on a 2-week awareness campaign now that's at this point just focused on social media. And hopefully by early next year, we'll start developing hard copy materials and other media that we can start sharing with farmers at Farmers' Days. So I would really like to invite you to follow some Facebook pages, go and like the South African Veterinary Council page, or even the National Animal Health Forum, because this is where these awareness materials are going to be shared. And yeah, feel free to share them with your fellow students. If you know any cattle farmers, please share it far and wide to get the message out there. So these are just some examples just of the pamphlets that has been distributed, and it contains very basic information. And I think the pictures are nice as well, just to capture people's attention with regards to brucellosis and just the basics of the disease and sort of how to prevent getting it infected yourself as well. So I urge you, yeah, please go and follow those pages and make use of the posters that we make available. These 3 were shared within this week, and then next week we'll be sharing some awareness materials on each day as well. Okay, thanks a lot. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Helena, jy's gemute.
And I made such an introduction now. Sorry. Thank you for your presentation. And yeah, you are well on time. There's 3 questions. The one attendee wants to know whether test is being done by state vets for smallholder farmers and whether it's free.
Okay, this sort of depends, once again, because veterinary services is provincialized. Each province's veterinary services gets a specific budget for veterinary services, and then veterinary services decides how much money they're going to set apart for brucellosis vaccination and for testing as well. So your smallholder farmers or lesser communal farmers, people that can't afford to have their animals tested themselves, they're welcome to contact their state veterinary offices to ask to have their animals tested. And if there's funds available, state veterinary services will go out and test those animals.
Okay, then we've got another question. What is the chances that you can get brucellosis from bleeding brucella in your herd, and maybe the blood coming in contact with your open wounds, on your hands? Has it been investigated to date or not?
Okay, so getting brucellosis from the blood of a brucella positive herd. So obviously, if you think about it, if the animal is in the bacteremic stage of the disease, meaning that they still have the active bacterial infection within the blood, then the blood can be potentially infectious. That period of bacteremia varies, and sometimes it's very short, but it can intermittently pop up again. But this is not sort of the main route of acquiring brucellosis. I would be a lot more scared if you're assisting with a calving or a retained placenta or a cow that aborted, and let's say there's vaginal discharges. If you're going to handle and touch those vaginal discharges, I would be a lot more concerned about that. But also, I mean, if I had to go out and bleed a brucellosis positive herd, I would at least just wear gloves. So I think it is important to protect yourself. Blood is definitely not the main mode of picking up the zoonosis. Watch out for vaginal discharges and for assisting cows with birthing or calving difficulties.
Okay, and then what role does wild game play in brucellosis? Could eland be a source of infection?
Okay, that's also a very good question. Unfortunately, there are several wildlife species that can act as reservoirs for brucellosis as well, the most well-known one being your buffalo. And this creates an unfortunate situation in South Africa that it would probably be impossible to completely eradicate brucellosis from the country just because we have that livestock-wildlife interface. Eland, as far as I know, can become infected with brucellosis as well, so they could then spread it to other eland or to other game species, and they could potentially spill it back to cattle as well. We do have scenarios where, okay, because your buffalo, before they're allowed to be moved, need to be tested for FMD, corridor disease, tuberculosis, and brucellosis. So we've picked up quite a few properties with buffalo that are currently under quarantine for brucellosis. And it creates a very, very difficult scenario, because even if you then get rid of the infected buffalo, if they were in contact or free ranging with other game, it could have easily spilled over into some game species. There's a lot more research required with regards to all the different types of species that can play a, let's say, more reservoir type of role with brucellosis. But the sort of rule of thumb is most mammals can become infected with brucellosis. If they then further spread it to other animals, sort of might remain a mystery with some species. So we definitely need more research, but your livestock definitely plays a role with brucellosis transmission, yeah, and your wildlife species as well.
Okay, then the final question is from Prof. Dirk Lawrence. He said, I've missed the first part of your presentation, so maybe you did address it. A few years ago, there was a lot of debate over the efficiency of RB51 versus S19 for heifers. Has this been sorted out?
Okay, that is unfortunately still being debated. Sort of the general feeling out there is people prefer to vaccinate heifers with S19 instead of RB51, but I don't think I don't have any access to published material where they directly compared the two to each other. So I think in terms of literature available, the results are still pending. We have unfortunately not solved that debate. So for now, as it stands, people seem to trust the S19 more, but unfortunately, that's not substantiated by studies or literature. So it could be a potential good study to actually conduct.
Okay,
Alicia,
any more questions?
Elena, can I just quickly get also support Alicia? I think there's, on the vaccines itself, it's both registered vaccines, it's been through all the registration procedures at Act 36. So I think both of them are very good vaccines. The main difference, as we know, is, strain 19 only between 3 and 8 months, because you can get positive reactions, or it's a false positive, if you vaccinate an animal older than 10, 11 months. The good thing is that you can actually vaccinate it at any stage. So I think it's, that's basically what we need to understand, that it's both there. It's the same as what we do have now with the COVID vaccines. Some people say they've got a new vaccine, it's 70% effective. There will always be a reason why a vaccine is not working. But in most cases, it's a human error. Either the vaccine was left outside and it was, you know, at high temperatures, or it was incorrectly injected subcutaneously instead of intramuscular and things like that. So one need to follow the letter of the package insert to the last letter, and then, you know, I think you will have a very good herd immunity then against this. I see Todd also asked, he has got a question. He's now our last speaker for the day, but he has got a question, Milena. Todd, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can hear
yes.
you.
Okay. These large herds that have now emerged over the years, and the bulk milk, you know, you can, with the milk ring test, I gather you can pick up one cow that's producing milk in 1,000 in the bulk tank. Very, very delicate test. Instead of bleeding 1,000 cows to pick up that one, can't you just milk them in groups, say of 100, and for each 100 a milk sample gets taken, and then another 100 cows get milked, and the bulk milk gets taken and recorded that way, and thereby whittling down the field through the milk ring test to say which 100 that infected cow came from. And maybe even from that 100 you can use the milk ring test. As I say, it's quick and easy and very cheap, and the farmer can do all that with the local vet and narrow it down through that way instead of all the blood tests.
But maybe Alicia, you can add on there, but I think the practical problem is there that you're going to miss the dry cows, you know, if you do it like that, or if you do it throughout the year, you will pick up the dry cow. Hopefully she will calve, you know, during that year.
Yeah.
But it's maybe a good thing to look at costs and so on. There's also a question from Rachel Liwayu. Brucella policy is good, but there's insufficient personnel, animal health technicians and state vets. Rachel, yes, we're busy addressing that together with SAVA, the South African Veterinary Association, and Ruvasa, the Ruvasa members. We're busy looking at a way to actually assist the state vets and the animal health technicians. Although this is a disease under Act 84, you know, that government or the department needs to manage, we need to bring everybody on board, all hands on deck, as they say on a ship. So everybody will be there, and then I think we can, and as you said earlier, Alicia, you know, everybody needs to come on board, and we need to fight this together. And this is why, you know, we started your 7 steps policy. The first 4 letters there is the acronym is VETS: vaccinate, educate, test, and slaughter. So it will all start with us as vets, private vets and state vets, and then we can take it to the next level. And then also influence the farmers, you know, to come on board.
Can I ask another question?
Yes,
I was infected in 1972, and I've never got rid of the infection. And my infection, rather embarrassingly, seems to have found a focus in glands that women don't have. And so I walk like an old cowboy down the street, you know, I'm undergoing a relapse. And quite a few of my farming clients are quite concerned that the vet is going to give his cows brucellosis when he does various maneuvers, but obviously that is totally impossible. But just for what it's worth, I've been infected for, how old am I? 50 years. And unfortunately, I only picked it up later, and all types of treatment has been proved totally useless. So for God's sake, let's get rid of this disease.
Todd, I'm thinking maybe we should then take a video of you walking down the street and use this as part of our awareness campaign.
You know, I'm a celebrity now, Alicia. I've written 6 and nearly 7 books. So that'll cost you big bucks.
Elena, I know we're getting into the lunch of the people, but Alicia, maybe yesterday they asked Chantel Hervé, you know, what was the journey up to now? Maybe if you can, in 2 minutes, just share your journey, you know, qualifying as a veterinarian, and you know, I know you're not in the office today because I can see it behind you, but tell us, you know, what did you do, you know, since qualification?
Okay, I qualified in 2011, and like most vets, I immediately jumped into small animal practice to get some clinical experience. I worked on the West Rand for 2 years for 2 different practices, and I did really enjoyed it. I enjoyed surgery a lot. The practical work, unfortunately, I saw with interactions with clients on a daily basis, I just saw that was unfortunately not for me, not for long term. I realized that it's not in my plans to eventually own or run my own practice, and I definitely don't just want to be a veterinary assistant for the rest of my life. So then I started looking around at avenues, and I saw that veterinary science is so broad. There are so many opportunities out there. It's fantastic to get clinical experience, but definitely don't limit yourself to that. I did some interviews for pharmaceutical companies, and then also at the National Department of Agriculture. And I was really, really lucky to get the position that I'm currently in the disease control office of the Department of Agriculture. And there, instead of now working with clients every day, I'm working with colleagues, I'm working with stakeholders, I'm working with state veterinarians, private veterinarians, industry representatives. So my world went from being so small, it just suddenly enlarged, and it just opened my eyes to what you can do in terms of promoting animal health. And I also just saw that all of us have our role to play. Your veterinarian in your local practice is extremely important for the community they're servicing. And then your vets that play other roles, for example, in industry or the pharmaceutical industry or for government. You have a very different role in terms of bringing everything together again and creating a bigger picture. Yeah, so I would urge everyone, go and get your clinical experience if that's what you would like to do. But remember, there's a very big world out there, and talk to vets that are in industry, in pharmaceutics, in state veterinary practice, because you might just learn something. Even research, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and it's actually very exciting being a vet. You should never become bored. Yeah, so that's my story.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for your contribution and sharing your experience.